Right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on the founder interview series by Indian startups. Here we invite founders, CEOs for sharing their entrepreneurial experiences, their idea, development of the venture, and factors that help make it a success. So today we have with us
Good evening,
Subhajeet
everyone.
Mukherjee,
Thank you for
founder
joining us
of the
on Founder Interview.
programming language, the Programming Foundation, a 501c nonprofit based in California, United States. He previously served as the data support engineer at the Pill Club and community support specialist at BetterHelp. He is also the author of Not in a Smart Us and LWS. He has previously given talks at Hacker Dojo, SF Bay ACM, SF Python, and Write the Docs LinkedIn. His real life heroes are Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. We have with us Subhajeet, founder of the Programming Foundation. We welcome you for today's interview, Subhajeet. How are you doing today?
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So let's jump in. Subhajeet, tell us a little bit about the Programming Foundation and what led you to starting the Programming Foundation.
Yeah, so I went to, long story short, I went to study computer science back in 2015 after graduating from high school from India to the US. And the initial, and I'm just going to cut it off, I studied the computer science. I did my freshman year at South Dakota State University. And then I moved to Foothill College. That was in 2016. And long story short, the initial idea of the Program Foundation, very initial stage, happened in 2018 with the basic problems. Like, one of the things that I noticed was that a lot of K-12 students, or a lot of students, start their journey in programming and get taught in schools with drag and drop tools. And the reality of programming in a workplace is way different. It's harsh. It's not as easy as it looks. So, and people don't usually learn how an operating system works in schools that much, especially legacy operating systems. HTML, CSS are not really programming languages. So these are some of the fragments of why I wanted to have something like a place where people could go and learn something like that. So I was in college at that in 2018. So I wasn't able to like spend time at this a lot. So that was one of the reasons. So cut to 2019, I was finishing up with college. I joined, like you said, at a healthcare startup. Worked there for a while. Moved to another startup in 2020, early 2020, and that's when the Program Foundation was established.
Right.
Theodore Rowley, who's the secretary of the Programs Foundation, joined right after that, and we launched the platform during the pandemic in May, so which was kind of adventurous. We got our 501c3 approval during a pandemic, which we never expected we thought completely impossible. So yeah, the Program Foundation is a 501c3, and we focus on education that is based on written instruction and interactive examples of processes, as well as providing volunteers with hands-on experience working together as a team, developing free and open source technologies.
Right, got it. So tackling the real problems that people face, that they're not, they don't develop the computer science skill holistically. They're just probably acquainted with with your superficial HTML, CSS, but then getting them all-round operating system-based knowledge. I think that's the problem that you are trying to tackle. That's very interesting, Subhajeet. But tell us about how the model works. As in, if I'm not wrong, it's a free platform, so anybody can join in, and you don't need a login also. So how does it work? How do you make revenues, or what's your business model like?
So we are a nonprofit. The whole business model is based on donations and support from the industry. And so, like other for-profits, we don't have the privilege of, going to a venture capitalist and ask for funding. That's not how we work, and that's not what we don't want to even do, because we don't want to monetize education in that way. So I'm telling you some of the points on why we chose this model. So, like I said, we think that learning operating systems, especially, and programming should be open and free to all. Uh, there's no, and one of the basic ideas of why we did that was that, there are a lot of websites and a lot of platforms out there where where you go there, and after 2 or 3 lessons they ask you to like sign up or maybe register for it, or sometimes they might ask, even charge you or so to go to the third level or fourth level. That really creates a barrier to entry, and a lot of people will feel demotivated. And especially we looked at places in the US, India, other parts of the world, region based, where people even lack the basic level of understanding of how an operating system works. So these people need to learn how things work, considering that automation is taking over a lot of works that are repetitive. So we need to bring up all these people together to a level where they have the base level understanding of how things work. So that was one of the second reason on why we did that. And the other thing is that the involvement of volunteers. We are a committed open source nonprofit. That means everything that we do, everything that we build, are made open source. It's out there. It's all based on permissions and licenses. So all these tools that we build, that the volunteers we engage in, even though they might not have experience when they join the Program Foundation as a volunteer, they would be able to gain hands-on experience on developing these tools. They might not necessarily have to be a technical person. We will involve a non-technical person, although I hate to say that word, non-technical, but we are trying to involve non-technical people to technical stuff. So that's how the thing is. And yeah, so we are fully based on donations and support from the industry leaders.
Right. That's amazing. So you plan to involve non-technical people. I mean, I know you don't like the word, but how can they sort of get onto your platform and take a quick path towards getting acquainted with the tools?
So it works two ways. The Program Foundation is a platform where anyone can go and learn operating systems, programming, specific programming languages like C, Python, object-oriented programming languages, and also learn operating systems, especially Unix. And these are all interactive systems where someone with a smartphone somewhere in Northeast India, or someone with a smartphone somewhere in the Midwest village area would be able to learn by interacting with it. But we also have a second model where we can take contribution. So if some of the users are interested in getting involved, getting experience on building open source and learn open source open source contribution works, they can actually apply to our so we have a dedicated page called volunteering. Anyone can go there, and we have a 3-step policy. So how that works is, so the first step is we have a lot of positions available. JavaScript developer, for example, because our platform is web, obviously we need JavaScript developers. We also have a big marketing team, and it's all volunteer based. So they would be able to choose what kind of position they want to join in. So if someone who is just graduating from college, for example, needs some experience, it doesn't, if they want to go to like marketing, or even if they want to go to like programming, for example, they can choose those things. And then the second step is an application process, where they once they have chosen the position, they would be given a form where it basically asks for like information like, name, what kind of things that they prefer, and all those kind of things. And we have a high bar in terms of that application process. So we make sure that we are getting quality volunteers. We are making sure that the contribution is quality. So that's, once that's done, the third step is they get an invite to our Slack channel, our Slack workspace, and that's where they get to interact with. So let's say if person A joins as a marketing volunteer on social network, they would be they're not restricted to social network only. We try to involve them in analytics, for example, Google Analytics or those kind of things, so that
Yeah.
they get some sort of experience in technicalities of it. We involve them with, so there's no barrier in terms of team division.
Yeah. So that's amazing to know that every volunteer or every person involved is actually working on different domains at the same time. They're also learning the marketing tools. They're also learning the coding tools. That's amazing to know. I think it's important as we move into the future and we go into digital first businesses. It's so important for everyone to just have a very basic understanding of how we conduct businesses, even digitally.
Right, right.
So it's nice to know you're solving that problem too. But two things that really interest me, Subhajeet, are how your program does not have any sort of login. Like you don't take the information from any of your users. So you have kept it truly open source. So that's one. And the other thing that also really sort of inspired me was it's friendly with all devices. You don't need a desktop to work on it. You can access it on a tablet. You can access it on your phone. So how was building that software itself? How long did it take you, or how challenging was it?
Yeah, it was interesting. See, we started we launched the platform during a pandemic, so we never expected that we would be able to survive 2020 at all. um, the some of the things that we did initially was that we made sure, in fact, this is something that you know I'm proud of the team in some ways, is that so the month after we launched the platform, we were able to receive a lot of industry support. And by that I mean, uh, just after we launched, we received the Google Ad Grants, which is an in-kind advertising grant from Google that allows us to target different regions in the world, which we wanted, like, to gain the user base. And I'm super proud to say, like, we have more than 25,000 users right now.
Wow.
And you mentioned that we don't have any sign up, and that's something that was there since the beginning. And it was kind of like, if people call it the necessity is the mother of all invention. Like, we didn't have like a backend system. We even right now we don't have a backend system. Like, we're not using any servers or anything. Servers, by the sense that is majority of them are client side. We have a static side, like that's how it is. So one of the issues that we saw was that the moment we reduce the barrier to entry for a user in the sense right now learners, we would be able to gain uh, much more learners in that way, and learners would find it much easier to learn something because the priority is learning. So that was one of the things. So we put it out there, and so one of the challenges that became a thing, and in the initial stages, was that how would we measure involvement? How would we measure
Yes.
who is like doing engage? How would we measure engagement in learners? So what we did was, and right now it's only available for Unix, C, and Python, is that at the end of every learning uh, every learning section, they would be able to there's a short quiz that is around 10 quizzes. So basic things like whatever the things that they learn. A lot of people, for example, thinks that Linux is an operating system. It's not. It's a kernel.
Yeah.
So the small things, these are basic core level ideas that a lot of people miss. So we ask them those kind of questions at the end of every learning section, and we see engagement through that. The other thing is obviously the analytics help us. So because through the Google Ad Grants, we were able to target different geolocations. We are able to see that, okay, we have a huge analytics in terms of majority of them are anonymous other than the volunteer, because we need to keep a track of our volunteers. So that's something that was very important. As far as the open source policy goes, We think that the license model that we use is MIT, not MIT, similar to MIT. So permissive licenses such as BSD. So that means it's all permissive. Anyone can actually use it, and they don't necessarily have to. So let me give you an example for the tools. So for the Unix thing, we built a Unix terminal inside the website. And that means anyone can do like echo hello world or something, and they would get immediate interactive outputs. And those things are all open
Yeah.
source. So the way and we were very fortunate in terms of getting volunteers who are best in their fields. Some of these people work at large industry leading companies, and they are selflessly working towards building this platform. And the new volunteers who are
Yeah.
unexperienced are able to get experience through them. So that was kind of eye-opening. We also developed an operating system. We are also in the process of developing an operating system that will eventually run on RISC-V, which is an open instruction set architecture. So we're planning to reduce the cost of a normal computer so that we can have Unix-based systems, and the operating system that we are developing on top of it, so that we are able to tap into places where people are mostly offline. So places in India, places in Midwest of US, places in Africa, and that kind of thing. But that's kind of like a major goal.
Right. Right. So do you mean to say that eventually you would also want to get into hardware and
Right, right.
understand the processors and how to effectively and with cost effectively bring them to the crowd?
Right. So that's one of our greater goals. And in order to go there, we have to obviously take some milestone, and there's some check boxes that we need to do. But that's one of our goals. That generally, when you buy a computer, the manufacturer actually uh, charges some amount of money for the patent fees for the manufacturer of the processor itself. So because the RISC-V is open source and open instruction set, there's no much cost involved through that. So we would be able to reduce the cost of a normal computer by a lot of margin. So generally, because our platform is online, there are people that would be not have access to general internet. So in order to remove that barrier, we are trying to have like a kind of achieving a consistent singular interface where they would be able to get much more involvement with a system level learning
Right.
on terminal.
That's great. One point that you mentioned was how you're able to get data from around the world from different locations. So does that mean you're developing a fair sense of how the computer literacy is around the world? Say in Africa, how is it in certain parts of Africa, or how is it in certain parts of India? Is that some metric that you're looking at and get an insight which would eventually maybe help someone?
Yeah. So the way, because you know uh, I I'm fortunate enough to be part of the two greatest democracies in the world. India being my homeland, and
Right.
US being my kind of like a second home. Although I'm not a citizen over there, but the so we targeted regions in the US and regions in India first when we launched, and we were able to get a lot of metrics. We saw that, for example, our Unix, Python, and C, the three things that we put out, we actually internally wanted to have more influence to get more reach for those particular uh, content.
Yeah.
So we saw, so right now, if you look at our analytics, you would be able to see that the top three countries right now in terms of consumption of Unix, C, and Python in our platform is US being the first one and India being the second one. The third one is UK. So, and the rest of the other countries in the top 10 are parts from Southeast Asia and parts from Africa, and also several underdeveloped parts in Europe. So that was kind of interesting. The other thing that we did was, so after TPF was launched, we launched a project called Reach for Help, which is right now is a thing of its own. But when we launched it, it was a volunteer-run initiative across the world. What it did was is that during COVID-19, we saw that a lot of people are in distress. There are people who are old but not able to go outside because of the lockdown. So what the Reach for Help platform enabled them, uh, and we work with nonprofits across the world, which is mutual aid organizations who have volunteer base. Uh, is basically an Uber for getting volunteers to help you out. So if someone is in distress somewhere in the northern region of India, or somewhere in the eastern region of US, they would be able to open up the application, which is all web-based, and they would be able to see and locate people around their radius and get help from them.
Wow.
So that was something that was huge, and it now has more than 300 plus volunteers. And that is something that we are proud of launching. So, and it was all open source. It's under GPL license, and is fully open source. So, and that's something that we are, proud of.
Wow, that's great. Was this something that you had imagined when you started the programming foundation, that
This was
something like this would come up?
so the way it worked was the Program Foundation actually. The people who were involved, who started they were all volunteers.
Right.
So it
Yeah.
was something that we never expected that this would go big, uh, but it was a success. So it was not something that we planned eventually. We planned in the
Yeah.
earliest times. We never thought that we would even survive until 2021, but we did. But that was something that happened, and Theodore, who is the secretary, uh, was actually one of the core members of the Reach for Help.
Right, right. So tell us a little bit about the team, or the core team,
Mhm.
uh, maybe your co-founder or your secretary.
Mhm.
How is it working with them? How did you reach out to them?
Mhm.
Because if I'm not wrong, th- this is your idea, isn't it? Like you had this vision of bringing computer literacy to everyone for free. So how did you onboard, your fellow colleagues or your employees?
Mhm. So first of all, we don't have any employees. We are all volunteers.
All volunteers,
All
right?
volunteers, right? And so the initial idea was started like in 2018, and when I was working, so Theodore, who's the secretary at the Program Foundation, was my roommate. So we lived in a hacker house. So it was kind of like so I knew Theo for a long time, but then when I got into my second company, or when I was working at the second company, I was like, okay, this is the probably a time where when we can. And this is just before the COVID-19
Right.
pandemic
Yeah.
started, early 2020, and the Foreign Foundation was registered, and Theodore. I was like, because I learned a lot from Theo. Theo is actually a bit senior from me. And Theo joined in, and Theo brought in a lot of different ideas to that, and that I think was very interesting, because one of the things like this whole open source movement, and if you call it, in terms of making every tool that we do open source, was Theo's idea. And so even the Reach for Help, so the whole idea of open source and connecting with Reach for Help was Theo's initiative, in that sense, if you may call it. So that's how it started. And then we onboarded volunteers. We now have around 40 plus volunteers. uh, that's the overall volunteer length, but in the core team we have around 15 volunteers
That's
who are
that's
part of
that's
the core
great.
team. Yeah. And
Yeah.
yeah.
So I think you represent the true definition of open source in a service oriented startup, right? Because I think the people who are using your platforms, they are building tools so that other people can benefit from them. So
Right.
that's how the cycle is, isn't it?
Yes. So when someone joins as a JavaScript developer, they have JavaScript developer. Doesn't matter. It can be a Golang developer or anything. They have it's a mindset thing. So they need to know that what they're doing, and the one of the biggest challenges that we faced initially when we launched the Program Foundation was that the issue of volunteer engagement, and that's how it is typically. Like, because when I worked at a startup, I 12 the companies that I worked at, both were startups, and one of the things was like there was no issues in terms of moving forward. People were meeting deadlines easily, like it, because it was a for-profit environment. With a non-profit, things are much more harder. It's like 10x or
Right.
12x or whatever, because first of all, they're not getting paid for what they're doing. The only incentive here is that they share this. The first thing is that they have to share the same mission as the Program Foundation. The second thing is there's no incentives to them. The only way as a nonprofit you have to incentivize them is by giving them recognition.
Hmm.
And that recognition comes through their contribution. That recognition comes through making sure. So we have launched a podcast as well. We have
Right.
newsletters and those kind of
Yes,
things.
I wanted to get into that.
Yeah.
Go
So
on, go on.
we launched podcast, and two of the hosts that host the podcast interview our volunteers on a daily basis.
Right,
And once
right.
they get, so that's a method of recognition. but
Yeah,
but obviously it's not like, so in order to maintain that, initially what happened, because we didn't have these programs internally, we would see like someone joins in 2 days in, we are not able to reach out to them, or there's no
yeah,
communication anymore, which
yeah,
was which slowed down our deadline. It still happens. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It still happens, but it's obviously minimized.
yeah,
But the moment we made sure that those people, after 6 months of volunteering, we are making sure that they are getting recognized for their work, things became much more easier. And we also
yeah,
make sure that the other incentivized thing is giving them a much more freedom in terms of what they can do. So if they might have any new idea, all right, like we can put it in as a R&D or something, where they would be able to work on it, show us a prototype, and like, okay, we can move forward with this. So
sure.
that helps, like a diversifying way.
I think it's so now we're talking about the culture at your startup, right? How uh, being a non-profit, they don't make money out of it, but then you need to keep them engaged. You need to retain them because they are adding value. So I think the model that you developed is genius. I have to say,
Thanks.
and I hope it's working out for you, and it continues to work out for you the same way. So
Yes.
also coming to the podcast itself. Apart from the podcast, if I'm not wrong, you also have started a newsletter, and you're also an author of a couple of books. So,
Right.
so how about that? So, is writing also your passion apart from programming?
Yeah. So I have been so the first book that I wrote an LWS. That's the full form is Love Without Sensuality, which is a book that I manuscript that I wrote when I was in secondary school in Kolkata, and then I published it when I was in high school, higher secondary, and I got internet connection, like broadband high speed internet connection. So that was about how I fell in love with operating systems, and how OSs have been. Like, I got my first computer when I was 4, and
Yeah,
my dad brought me that, and the computer was Windows 98 based. So I developed a passion towards operating systems since then, and I was building an operating system, and I'm still doing that. Uh, like just after like high school, that's when it started fully. So that was about how I fell in love with operating systems. And then I moved to then I went to study computer science to take an associate's degree in computer science in the US in 2015 after graduation. And I was still developing the operating system, and I was fortunate to receive a letter of commitment from the Brookings Economic Development Corporation. And they basically gave me a letter of commitment which stated like that can create much more opportunities if the OS is being developed. And that was in South Dakota. So I moved to from South Dakota to Silicon Valley in order to make sure that grows. And that's when I wrote the Not in a Smarter Us, which was also because it was kind of based on why I wanted to build the operating system and why I thought it was important. Um,
Amazing.
so that's what. And then I had a patent in India and those kind of things. So that was everything that was happening. So writing is definitely one of my biggest. I like writing. That like I run a blog personally. And these are all my personal stuff other than the Foreign Foundation. And yeah, that's
But
how.
helps, yeah. But I think in today's world, content is king, and whatever you do out there, people are watching you, people are following you, and it's great to keep them engaged through other like, for example, Elon Musk used Twitter. He literally built his company on Twitter, and and gained a lot of traction in at least the B2C market through your social media presence, right? That's great to know, Subhajit.
Yeah.
So is coding and writing? So is that, would you say that's your first love?
Yeah, I would say operating system and writing is my definitely something that I prefer doing. Other than photography, photography is something that I also like. So photography and writing is
Right,
like kind
right.
of side things that
Nice.
I
That's
prefer.
good to know.
Yeah.
So let's come back to the topic. So what are your plans uh, apart from the programming foundation? Are you also looking, to set up for-profit organizations, or are you expanding, maybe diversifying into a for-profit through the programming foundation, or do you believe it purely has to be a donation based uh, through the future?
Right. So the Program Foundation will remain a nonprofit because that's how the foundation skills are, and foundation that's how it is. That's how it started. And I think a lot of people who are users right now would feel hurt if we change to a for-profit model. And by law, we are not able to change that as well. So that's just a dead end right there.
Right.
We have plans in terms of we have, like I said, the operating system is one of our greater plans, but in order to achieve that, we have set small milestones. So for 2020, so 2020 was like a year of growth, I would say. We
Right.
grew a lot. We managed to make sure that we have some sort of industry support in any way, and we have made sure that the volunteer base is growing. So that was 2020. 2021 would be a year of survival, and just
Yeah.
like any other startups. And the other thing is that we have set a lot of milestones in order to go to that large scale thing. So a grant is something that we are looking forward to. So a lot of nonprofits apply for grants, which allow them to, and there are different kinds of grants, will unrestricted. So that's what we are planning to do. And grant writing is hard, so we have volunteers who are actually working hard on that, uh, so that we can have unrestricted donations, so that we can survive, and so that we have that fuel basically
Right.
to do
Right.
in order to sustain ourselves. That's one thing. The In terms of, as far as the innovation goes, one of the priorities for 2021 is accessibility. We think that because our main goal is to make sure that to bring up the people who are at the base level who doesn't have any understanding of operating
Yeah.
system and programming,
You're right.
and democratize the education. uh, we have to make sure uh, that there is inclusion at all places. So what that by that I mean accessibility is one of our priorities. But so there are people who are blind, but they don't know how to code. They might not know. There's a lot of people who are blind who might not
Right.
know how to code. how
Yeah.
can we teach them how to code?
Yep.
That's one priority for us, and we are doing heavy research and R&D on that,
Right.
and we have found some success. Uh, so that was one of the things. The other challenge that the other milestone that it's trying to achieve is uh, uh, how can we make sure that the interactive learning experiences that we have are don't necessarily require that much data. So right now, so speed is one of the criteria that we
Yep.
are measuring. So there might be people who might have like access to internet somewhere in uh, West Bengal or somewhere in Northeast Assam or something. I'm just saying, and they might have access to internet, but they might not have access to fast internet. So the website load times is something that we are prioritizing so that the speed is
Um,
instantaneous.
yeah.
So that's
You're
one thing.
optimizing it
Right,
to for it to
right.
work on any bandwidth.
Inclusion is something that we're looking at. And for example, one of the biggest issues right now is that we have a lot of less, there's a huge gap in terms of men and women in technology.
Hmm.
There's very low number of women who are leading or leading a technology company or being in technology.
Right.
That is a huge channel. We also think that LGBTQ communities need to
Right.
come into more technology. Like the whole idea of LGBTQ, we need to bring them into technology so that we have full inclusion on that side. So for example, let me give you an example. This is something that we do is that the moment a volunteer joins,
Yeah.
and this is something that we are in the process of implementing, is basic things like pronouns is
Hmm.
something that we focus a bit. So
Hmm.
uh, instead of dividing people with just he or she, we are
Yeah.
making sure that what happens, how would you refer to a LGBTQ person? So, or it doesn't have to be LGBTQ. It can be he or she person.
Right. Right.
But instead of using he or she, we are trying to use words like them or they, those kind of
Got
things.
it. Got it.
So that it's neutral. So that's how the company culture is being developed, and I'm proud to have
Hey,
volunteers who.
kudos to that, Subhajeet. I think your focus on the company culture and the cause for which you believe in and you're working at it, it's truly inspirational. I think more and more people should get into the space to explore how they can use the skills they have to help out and make the world a more inclusive place. And right. Be it anybody, be it LGBTQ, be it disability,
Right.
or just make it a more inclusive place, even if not through a nonprofit, at least through your company culture, right? I think that's
Right.
a great takeaway, Subhajeet, from today's session. Apart from so many interesting things that you have told us, I think sadly this brings us to the end of today's interview. I had a great time talking to you.
Same here.
I hope the same with you.
Same here.
So let's be in touch. And any final line or two for our viewers would you would want to say?
Yeah, I think the Indian startup community is thriving, and I've seen it. I'm currently in India. I came back in a evacuation flight, Vande Bharat, from there too.
Oh, okay.
I'm currently in Kolkata, but the Indian startup ecosystem is thriving, and I'm really proud of that. And just for the founders, I think I can share a small piece of thing that I personally learned is that a lot of founders may think that it's heroic to like leave their job and start a company, or like drop out from college and start a company.
Hmm.
It should work the other way.
Hmm.
The best thing is in order to if you really want to start a company, get a good job and self-fund it initially,
Hmm.
and so that it thrives in the initial stages, and then it becomes self-sufficient, instead of looking for instead of looking for like valuation from others or like investors or something. No one's gonna fund you on ideas. The other thing is like it's important to like make sure that and this is something that I personally think is very important, is that building a very conscious strategic very conscious strategic narrative
Yeah.
that will help as a founder, not from a startup point of view, but as a founder, which like even if there's plan B or plan C, the route that you take should actually lead you and increase the probability of success for your startup. So yeah,
Right.
that's that.
So that's a great closing note. It was a great evening talking to you, Subhajeet. I don't know what time it is over there, but in India it's 6:30 p.m. So let's be in touch, and we wish you all the very best for the program and for the team at Programming Foundation and your group of volunteers. And let's be in touch and see you soon.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye.
Take care.